Will the Toronto real estate market go up or down in 2025 and beyond? The government is an absolute shit show. The country is on fire. Seemingly the world is on fire, and there's just so much conflicting information out there. So how do you really know what's going on and what's going to happen to the real estate market? Well, in this video, I'm going to do my best to give you my take on what I think will happen to the real estate market here in Toronto in 2025 and beyond. Let's get into it. Now, if you have any questions or need help navigating this ever-changing real estate market, feel free to click the link below and book a no-obligation call with our team. Real estate is not like the stock market or even the crypto market where trades get executed instantaneously unless the markets are closed. Real estate is more like a cyclical, seasonal, somewhat predictable roller coaster ride. And the reason for this is because there's just way more friction that happens with a real estate transaction, right? You have to discharge or get a mortgage. There are taxes when buying and selling. You have to get lawyers involved, and you actually have to physically pack and move, and no one really wants to do that. The average time frame that a Canadian homeowner owns a home for is around 7 years. Now, with that being said, let's jump right into the data. Straight from the source, the Toronto Real Estate Board. All charts that I'll be showing are specifically for the Greater Toronto area. Now, remember that predictable roller coaster I was telling you guys about? This is the number of new listings in the GTA from now, November 2024. December data is not out yet. It'll be out at probably first, second week of January. But regardless, November 2024 all the way back until January 2015. And pretty much the exact same thing happens every year. Bottoms out in December. That's when we see the lowest amount of new listings. And then as the spring approaches, we kind of see it catapult. That's when people start listing their homes as the spring market approaches. Then it kind of pulls back down and we see a slight peak again pretty much every September. So it's down, up, down, and then back down to December. And that pretty much happens every year. Now let's take a look at the number of active listings here in the GTA. Typically what we see is, again, it bottoms out every December, right? As inventory gets absorbed throughout the year. But take a look at what's happening now. We're in November and we have more active listings now than any point. As a matter of fact, if I go back to the beginning of when TREB kept its records, we have more active listings now in November than any point since they started keeping the data, which is pretty incredible. Yeah, it might drop a bit in December, but even if it drops to, let's say, somewhere around here, it's still gonna be an all-time high considering it's December, where we typically see the least number of active listings. Now let's take a look at sales. This is the number of sales, not the sales price, which we will get into. Again, pretty predictable, right? We see it bottom out every December, January, and then we see sales increase as we go to the spring market. It kind of is reciprocal to the number of listings, right? It makes sense. But take a look at what's been happening over the last 2 or 3 years. The peaks aren't as high. Every year, 2023, 2022, it's going down. We see a downward trend in the number of sales. Now let's dig deeper into the number of active listings. Let's break it up by area. And we can quickly see that the growth is primarily driven by the number of active listings here in Toronto. We are at an all-time high, and second place is York and third place is Peel, followed by Halton, Durham, and Simcoe. But the main driver of the number of active listings is Toronto. Now let's take a look at active listings by property type. The first thing I want to point out is take a look at these bottom 3 lines. We have condo townhouses, and semi-detached, and it's been relatively even for the last decade, and it's not that surprising because this is the property or asset class where first-time home buyers are competing for, right? Because most of the time, who can afford like $1 million, $1.5 million detached home as their first home? So a lot of demand for this type of property, and there's not that much supply. So we see that be relatively stable over the last decade. Now, what is driving the active listings. Let's take a look at detached, right? We see, yes, detached is not as high as it was in 2019, 2018, 2017, but over the last, let's say 3 or 4 years, the inventory has been slowly building up. And I think that's just because there's an expectation gap. Sellers are expecting COVID prices maybe, and we're not getting that. And buyers just simply can't afford as much because, let's face it, Canadians are poorer than they were 4 or 5 years ago. So we see detached properties build up as well. Second is the condo apartments. This is again a primary driver of the active listings. It's just been going up and up and up and up. And that's just because if you've been downtown Toronto lately, you'll know why. If you look up, there's condo buildings everywhere. I think 20,000 units completed in 2023 and 20,000 completed units in 2024. And we're expected, I think, like another 75,000 units under construction in the Toronto core. This is only going to go up. But keep in mind, as we get closer to 2030, the number of new construction units for condo apartment actually gets closer to 0. And if you want another way to visualize it, take a look at this model by precondo.ca. Shout out to precondo.ca. Crazy visualization. I love this. But look at all of these condos that are being either constructed or are close to being constructed, right? This is the primary driver of the number of active listings. But the thing is, once this all gets absorbed, as we get closer to 2030, there's no more being built because there's no more land to build condos on unless we tear things down. But again, that's going to be expensive. Now let's take a look at average sales price going all the way back since 1988. The general trend, well, yeah, real estate goes up over time. There's a lot of noise and speculation, but over time, the trend is it goes up. Now there's 3 main things that have happened that I want to draw your attention to. Number 1, remember that 2008 financial crisis? Well, here it is. It doesn't seem that bad, right? It's not that much of a drop. Yeah, $50,000 at a $400,000 average sales price. It's not nothing. But CDOs didn't really affect Canadian banks as much as they did American banks. So that was the financial crisis. Now we see another spike. So this is 2008. We see another spike maybe 8-9 years later. Boom, look at this. Huge spike in 2017. Primarily driven again by extremely low interest rates, and this time by foreign buyers, mostly Chinese. And it's a psychological game, right? It's a market. Like think the tulips, right? From the Netherlands, I believe it was. Don't quote me on that. But it's basically like, okay, man, everybody is buying. I have this fear of missing out, or the market has this fear of missing out, and then people overpay. So that's what happened here in 2017. And then immediately the price adjusted and back to reality come summertime 2017. Now, finally, the third thing, and I think this is the most revolutionary thing we've seen since 1988, right, is what happened in 2020. Well, prices shot up way higher than they normally do. Look at this cycle. It went from 820 all the way to the peak of 1.3 million. And now we're back down to 1.1 million. But a few things happened that changed humanity, right? Number 1 was COVID introduced remote work. So that means you don't have to go to the office. You can buy real estate in York region and be working downtown. So that drove a huge amount of demand for housing. So that increased average sales price because there's more demand. Number 2, and I'm going to show you guys this, which is freaking crazy, is money. The Canadian dollar is worthless, right? We're trading right now, as of December, less than 70 cents per US dollar, which is crazy, super low. And that's because we've printed so much money. Take a look at the M2 money supply. It pretty much correlates to what I'm showing you here in 2020. Money is worthless, which means asset prices go up, right? And the third thing, interest rates in 2020 during COVID, they had to bring them down to record low levels, and that made debt super cheap, which again gave people borrowing power, which means they could buy property. That again drove up the sales price. And another thing, immigration. We brought in 60 billion people from all over the world into Canada. Don't quote me on that. It's probably more like 4 or 5 million, but regardless, these people need homes. So that drove up the average sales price. So immigration, Inflation, low interest rates, and a culture shift drove this huge cycle of upward pressure on sales prices for real estate. Now, let's take a look at average sales price in the last 10 years. Okay, we are definitely coming down in terms of price. If we're looking at the peak in 2022, here's the peak in 2023, here's the peak in 2024, right? Every year for the last 3 years, we're coming down in terms of sales price. So if we were on a roller coaster, yeah, we're definitely heading down. The question is, where is the bottom? Now with real estate, I don't think that bottom is ever going to be ridiculously low because kind of like cryptocurrency, there's a limited supply. Where? Well, if you want my opinion, I don't think we're ever going to see prices go below the peak of 2017, right here, April 2017, 917,000. So if we could draw an imaginary line here, I don't think that bottom is ever going to touch that number. Why? Well, number one is money is worthless, right? They printed billions and billions of dollars. I think the deficit they just announced was $62 billion. Money is just worthless. Like, you're never going to see gas below $1 a liter, right? I don't care if inflation is 2% year over year. They've already done the damage. So that's number one. Number two, immigration. Everybody that comes in needs a house. It's going to drive up demand. Let's say there's 5 million people. I think there were 5 million people that have come into the country in the last 5 years. There's only 40 million people in Canada, right? So 1 in every 8 Canadian, or person in Canada rather, I should say, is not a Canadian. They've come in the last 4 or 5 years. They have the opportunity to be a PR, to get citizenship, whatever, but that's crazy. Are they all going to leave? No. So even if, let's say, half of them leave, half of them stays, that's a permanent 2.5 million. And I think that number is percentage is high. I think more than half are going to stay. But like, that's 2.5 million people we've artificially injected into this Canadian real estate market. We haven't built that many homes. So prices are naturally not going to come down that much, right? Everybody needs a home. And finally, interest rates. They're already dropping interest rates. They just dropped it by 0.5 basis point, and it's at like 3.5. They're going to drop it down to 2.1 because if the market seemingly crashes, well, they're just going to lower interest rates. And, you know, if people don't have money, well, people can have debt. Here's free debt, cheap debt, guys. And that cheap debt is going to drive prices to go up again. And it's already happening now. Buyers, I have a lot of buyers coming to me looking and ready to buy. So yeah, with that being said, I think if we are coming down, right, and there's a bottom, yes, there was going to be a bottom. We haven't hit it yet, but it's not going to go below April 2017. Now let's take a look at average sales type or price by home type. Okay, we see this is the blue line, which is detached prices. We're currently sitting at 1.45 million. I think that number has a chance to come down a little bit because buyers set the price in any market, right? And Canadians just can't afford as much. And if we remember the slide or the segment earlier where I was showing you the number of inventory, that inventory is pretty high even for detached homes. So expect this price to drop going into 2025. Now let's take a look at condo apartments. I know it's kind of hard to see. Treb, come on, man. Get more colors in here. It's so hard to see, but take a look at this. 689,000. I think this is where we expect to see the biggest drop. It's already happening because the number of active listings are through the roof, right? So condo apartments are going to drop the highest. It just has to because of the amount of inventory. And then detached homes will drop not as much in terms of percentages. I'm not going to speculate on 2%, 3%, 4%. There's no way I can know that. And then if we take a look at townhouses, semi-detached, I think these are going to stay relatively stable. It might drop a little bit, but honestly, I don't even think it will because there's just not a lot of demand. There's a lot of competition for these types of homes. So yeah, I think that's what's going to happen with sales prices going into 2025. Now remember the seasonality aspect. Listings go up every spring, right? Which means there's a lot of people right now that don't have homes on the market that are waiting for the spring market to list. So we're going to have an increased inventory. But to counteract that point, homes get absorbed and bought in the springtime as well. So I think we're going to see a similar pattern there in terms of active listings and sales. But I think that price number is going to be lower relative to 2024, right? And it's going to be the lowest for condo apartments. That's going to see the steepest drop. And then detached is going to see the second steepest drop. And then followed by townhouses, semi-detached. I don't think there's going to be much of a drop there. I think that's going to be pretty balanced. Now, I didn't say anything revolutionary here, right? Prices are coming down. We all know that. But what's going to happen as we approach 2030? Now, there's one thing that we know for sure. The conservatives are probably going to have a majority government. That's what all polls indicate. And honestly, I'd be shocked if anything else happened. So let's say Pierre Poilievre holds his promise. You know, he axes the tax, gets the country under control, builds the homes. That's a slogan, right? So let's say, you know, he stops the country from bleeding. He extinguishes the fires. Well, how is that going to affect home prices? It is, but it's not going to really for many years. It's not like conservatives get elected, all of a sudden Canadians become richer overnight. No, that stuff takes years. And considering the amount of damage this government has done, it may take decades, right? So the immediate effect of governments will not really impact home prices that much, in my opinion. Also, if there's one thing that I've learned in my 31 years on this planet is that you don't trust any government. Now, long term, going into 2030, I'm actually bullish on the GTA real estate market. Here's why. I have been to every province here in Canada. I've been to every city except for Newfoundland. Sorry, one day I'll go there and I'll play Cabot Cliffs, but I have not been to Newfoundland. But every other city and province I have been to. And the cities that exist today, that's it, right? It's not like we're going to build new cities in the middle of nowhere. We might have small towns and settlements, but for the most part, the cities that exist are the ones that are going to exist, right? The cities that Napoleon and the towns that Napoleon fought in 200 years ago, they still exist today. The mountains and the plains, which consisted of, you know, no homes and no settlements that Napoleon fought in, well, there's still nothingness 200 years later, right? Cities kind of are set in stone, right? Look at Cairo, for example. They're moving their capital. It's basically bankrupted Egypt. I think Indonesia and Jakarta, they're trying to move the capital closer to Borneo, if I'm not mistaken. That's going to cost hundreds of billions of dollars. So like the major cities in Canada, that's it, guys. In 100 years, it's still going to be Vancouver, Ottawa, Toronto, Montreal, Calgary. It's going to be the same cities 100 years from now. So, okay, long term, the demand is always going to be in the GTA. It's not going away, right? What about supply? Well, take a look at this. This is the green belt, right? If we're taking a look at the GTA, we can't really build north because it's protected. Now, yeah, Doug Ford will get bribed here and then, but like I think the majority, let's call it at least 80% of this green belt is still going to be intact, you know, 25 years from now. I could be wrong. And then if you go south, well, there's a huge body of water called Lake Ontario. We're not going to build there, right? So there's not land. There's no land. Where are we going to build? We can only build up, which has already happened. We see condo units in terms of construction are nearing zero as we close to 2030. So the fundamental issue of supply exists, kind of like Bitcoin or any cryptocurrency. And if you're a visual person like I am, here's the GTA from a bird's eye view. Well, more like a satellite's eye view, but look at Lake Ontario. Blocks us south, can't build there. The green belt surrounds us from the north and the west, right? So yeah, you can build in Hamilton and Keswick, but not everyone wants to be an hour away. So there's really no land to build. You have some development, you know, near Markham, Stouffville, you see that. Pickering has a lot of new developments. Same with like the northwestern part of the GTA. But other than that, there's nowhere else really to build. There's a fundamental supply issue here in the GTA. Now let's compare the GTA with a city like Las Vegas, for example. On the left is Vegas from 20 years ago. On the right is Vegas now. Vegas is one of the fastest growing cities in North America in the last decade, and now we know why. They can grow in every direction, northeast, southwest, because they're not blocked by a lake, they're not blocked by a green belt, right? And now finally growth is stopping because they're actually, you know, approaching the mountains where you can't really build. But, you know, my point, I'm just trying to make a point here. It's like the GTA, there's a limited amount of space where a lot of cities don't have this problem. Now, everything is cyclical, and we know that cities are permanent fixtures within a country. So with that being said, the GTA faces a fundamental issue. There's no land really to build. It is super expensive unless you want to go like an hour drive away, which not many people want to do. So fundamentally, it's kind of like cryptocurrency. Supply is capped, and everybody wants to be close to a city, or at least the majority of people. Now, I know there's a lot of chaos going on right now in 2024 as we approach 2025, but in the long term, as we approach 2030, prices have to go up. I'm not going to speculate whether it's 5% a year or 5.5% a year. There's no way I can know that, especially if the government can just change rules whenever they want. So I'm not going to speculate on that, but as a general pattern, as a general trend, it has to go up in the next cycle. So if prices in 2022 were here and 2024 is here, we're probably going to drop even lower. It's not going to go below the 2017 peak. Condos are probably going to dip for a longer period of time and for a higher percentage than detached homes, right? It's going to go down here, right? Detached might be like this a little bit. Townhomes and semis are probably not going to go down at all. And then hopefully there's some order in this country as conservatives take power again. So we'll see maybe more, not crazy changes year over year, more of a balanced market as we approach 2030. But then towards the next big cycle, because of this supply cap issue and the increased demand and the worthlessness of fiat currency, prices have to go back up as we approach the end of the decade. And look at that, I just drew a financial analysis price projection with my finger. Guys, it's just high level stuff. I'm not doing a DCF here. Now, to play devil's advocate, everything that I've said so far is based off of some huge assumptions that will take place for the rest of the decade as we approach 2030. Number one, there are no more acts of God or Satan, as in what happened with COVID. Number two, the fiat currency and the Canadian dollar does not collapse, and universal basic income does not take into effect just yet. Number three, the foreign buyer ban is permanent and continues until 2030, but who knows, maybe they allow work permit people to buy, who knows, right? Number four is the government does not start seizing property, which I know you're like, Ichi, that's crazy. But honestly, with the track record of the government, I would not be surprised. And they're kind of already doing it in the States, right? With all of these major corporations and hedge funds buying up personal property. I wouldn't be surprised if that were to happen in Canada. And honestly, we see the increase in rental purpose housing here in the GTA. Like, you and I can't buy that anymore. It's just developers that perma own it. So in a sense, they kind of already are. So those are some huge assumptions that I'm making. Honestly, there is no way to know for sure where the market is gonna go. This video was kind of just some food for thought, some ideas to get you thinking, and obviously we went off some real data that Treb provided as well. So I hope you found this video insightful and enjoyable, and we'll look back onto this video in a few years from now and see where we're at. Maybe I was right, maybe I'm wrong. We'll never know. Time will tell. So thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time.